Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference channel. My name is Jesse Day. We're counting down to the next VRIC, January 21st and 22nd. There is a link in the description below where you can get your tickets, but we are bringing the VRIC to you with our series of online panels, and we have a very special one lined up for you today. I'm here with Bob Moriarty of 321 Gold and Rafi Farber of the Endgame Investor. We're going to discuss gold in a divided world. Gentlemen, it's great to have you on the channel.
It's great to be here, Jesse. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on too.
Yes, I'm very excited for this one. Big fan of both of your work. And I want to start with a pretty basic question, but one that I think it's important to discuss. And that is, why do you think it is important for people to be holding physical gold and silver potentially in their possession right now as we sit here today? Bob, I'll start with you.
Okay, you're going to hate me for doing this because I'm going to take your question. I'm going to break it into two questions. Under the British education system, they teach that the question is more important than the answer. Now, I could give a short answer to that, but it wouldn't be comprehensive. So I'm going to ask the question in a different way. If you were a 16-year-old kid or a family or a corporation or a city or a state or a nation, would it be valuable to have a reserve? And of course, the answer is, yeah, of course. Okay, if you're a 16-year-old kid and you borrow a dad's car and you run over a curb and blow a tire, you need $200 so you can buy a tire. So dad doesn't find out about it and ground you. But everybody needs a reserve. And the second question would be, what makes the very best reserve? And I try to make this point in my books that you don't have to know anything about investing to actually make money. All you have to do is follow the people who are investing already and seeing what they're doing. Now, what do central banks, Russia, China, and now Iran have in common in terms of reserve? And the answer is they're all buying gold. So the simple answer is we all need a reserve. And at times of financial crisis, you need to have the most secure, best reserve possible. And in my opinion, it's physical gold and silver. And it's not just physical gold and silver, it's physical gold and silver in your hand.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you there. And Rafi, do you have anything to add to that? Why do you think it's important to hold physical gold and silver in your hand, as Bob said? And maybe you could also give us some thoughts on what you think about ETFs, whether that be something like the PYHS from Sprott that actually has physical gold to back it, or something, like the SLV, which does not.
Right. Okay, so in my way of thinking, I agree with everything Bob said, of course. And the thing that I focus on is that there's two reasons to have physical gold and silver in your hand. One is because you want to profit in this upcoming collapse, assuming you believe that's what's going to happen. But much more importantly, and what I've been focusing on lately, is that if you trace back, we all know the world is going corrupted in every sphere. Everything is corrupted. Education is corrupted, politics is corrupted, medicine is corrupted, pharmaceuticals are corrupted, academia, everything is corrupted. And why is it corrupted? Because the inflation machine that is fed by the Federal Reserve and the money is directed with, tributaries by Congress into different things, right? For example, how can Pfizer get all this money for its medications? Because they force Medicare and Medicaid to pay for it by covering it with FDA approval or whatever it is they get. And then they get like a latch into the inflation system right into their bank accounts. That's how it works. That's how the inflation corrupts education. It corrupts everything. Now, how do you fix inflation? How do you end it? Well, we talk about Exner's pyramid a lot. It's gold. On top of gold is physical paper dollars. On top of that is debt. On top of that is deposits. On top of that is stocks. On top of that is bonds. On top of all that is Bitcoin. It goes in a giant pyramid. And if you want to, attacking the top layers of the pyramid, it can be very daunting because that's where the government is very powerful. And you don't want to mess with their big banks, and they're untouchable and you can't really do anything about them. And it's just this huge corruption machine. But where can you really get them? On what issue will they not censor you? They won't censor you on gold and silver because they don't even realize that they are on top of the same pyramid that we are. So every physical gold and silver ounce that we hold in our hand physically, that's chopping down the base of the entire pyramid. And yes, it will cause it to fall over. And that is very scary. And there's going to be a lot of negative consequences for a lot of people, meaning everyone who thought that they had money will not have money. And everyone who has gold and silver will have all the money because that is the money and everything else is a derivative. We're going to chop that pyramid down. Everything's going to fall over. And then we're going to have to rebuild it ourselves. But that's our job. We have to end this corruption by going beneath them all, digging under the entire thing and toppling it over. That's why we need physical gold and silver. And you'll protect your family in the meantime, which is a good thing too.
And your thoughts on the ETFs, whether actually holding physical gold and silver or just tracking the price?
So ETFs are fine if you're trying to make dollars using gold and silver. You can still do that. That's possible. But that's just a game. Okay. If you get a thrill of it, if you enjoy it, if you like seeing more dollars in your brokerage account, if you're playing the trading game and you want the thrill, fine, do it. There's no problem with it. But don't expect ETFs to help you in a true endgame scenario where the dollar collapses and everyone's panicking and nobody has food or electricity. ETFs aren't going to help you. You're not going to be able to trade them for anything. So maybe you can make some dollars with ETFs, but if you want to survive the end game, you need physical gold and silver coins in your hand because that's what's going to be traded in the immediate aftermath of this.
Well, I want to shift to the recent BRICS summit because there was a lot of hype surrounding the potential announcement of a gold-backed currency. The Russian embassy in Kenya tweeted about this before the meeting, which caused a lot of speculation to swirl online. Now, we didn't actually see that announcement materialize, but we did see the BRICS strengthened by an invitation extension to 6 additional members. So I wanted to know what your thoughts were on the summit in general, and do you think we will eventually see a gold-backed BRICS currency? Start with you again, Bob.
Okay, I want to add something to what Rafi said, because I think he said something very important. We effectively left the gold standard in 1971 under Nixon. We know what the length of a meter is. We know what the quantity of a liter is. We know what a gram weighs. Money has to be fixed. You cannot have money as a variable. And when we went off the gold standard, when there was no longer a tie to gold, we literally went into Never Land with the government spending money like drunken sailors. And we're about to pay the price. And of course, the obverse is true too. The solution to it is to go back to gold. Now, going back to BRICS, I don't know why the Russian embassy did that. They got a lot of attention towards the BRICS meeting, but they got the attention for what I consider a negative reason. There's been lots of discussion about a BRICS central currency of some sort. India's dead set against going to a gold standard. The issue of will they go to a BRICS gold standard, I think it's absolutely meaningless. Eventually, someone is going to go to a gold standard. You don't have to have any agreement from anyone to do it. Russia could do it, China could do it, the United States could do it. And my opinion is the first country that does it is going to end up being the richest country in the world because everybody's going to want to deal with them. But going back to BRICS, the real significance of the BRICS meeting was they now are going to control 80% of the energy in the world and over 55% of the GDP. This is a giant shift away from the debt-based system of the West to a resource-based system of the East. So it's significant for that reason, but the BRICS gold standard is meaningless.
Rafi, your thoughts on the BRICS summit and the potential for a gold-backed BRICS currency?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with Bob here also. I don't think there's any potential of a gold-backed currency by BRICS. I think that's all nonsense. Because at bottom, they don't want, there's no government that wants to return to gold, because that means they have to deal with reality and balance their checkbook. I mean, that's not going to happen. So that's not even a goal for them. I think that's just something that gold bugs are latching onto because we want some kind of news to focus on, so we can look at the next thing. Ultimately, everything's going to fall. It's not going to be BRICS, and I don't see the gold standard returning as some kind of agreement of central powers to say, okay, we're going to go on gold now and wreck the entire way that our economies are structured, and then we'll deal with the riots afterwards with whatever power we have left, and possible suicide. It's for a government to go back on gold after all this inflation, and everyone is on inflation because everyone is following the Fed more or less within certain exchange rates. It's like a massive dose of chemotherapy for a government. And why would they do that voluntarily? They wouldn't unless they're dying. And it's going to be a bottom up thing. It's going to be the dollar dies, therefore every other currency underneath the dollar dies, therefore nobody has any money, and governments can't pay their thugs. So then people in the street in local communities start trading gold and silver with each other to try to build up economies locally, and then we start reattaching from the ground up. It's going to be a long process, and I really hope that some, as bad as the Biden administration, not even specifically the Biden administration, any administration, since Nixon or even before that, since FDR, they're all bad. But what scares me even more than a U.S. administration that has no respect for liberty, let's say Xi Jinping or China, if he were in charge of anything and he actually had superpower status, that's a world I do not want to be in. That really terrifies me. Putin, okay. I don't like Putin either, but Xi Jinping, because now he has power because he's the head of the BRICS, that's terrifying. And I don't want that. I am not a BRICS fan. And I hope they fail, and they will, because they're just another derivative of the dollar, whether they like it or not.
Very fascinating viewpoint there. And Bob, you brought up Nixon and removing gold backing from the US dollar in 1971. So I wanted to ask, what were the main impacts on money that resulted from that move? And are we still experiencing the implications of that decision today in the economy?
Absolutely. Rafi made a really good point. And I was interested in hearing it because he's not saying it necessarily from an American perspective. He's saying it from an Israeli perspective. But our medical system is bankrupt. Our financial system is bankrupt. Our political system is beyond bankrupt. We got a president that has been credibly accused by a House Representative Oversight Committee of taking $50 million in bribes, and nobody cares. And they're about to bring back COVID 2.0, where 100% of what they said and did with COVID 1.0 has turned out to be a lie, because they want to get Biden back into office. They're going to go to COVID 2.0. And I'm wondering, at what point is there a revolution? And of course, the revolution is going to occur. It's going to be a worldwide revolution when the system crashes and the banks close. And Rafi is absolutely correct. No government wants to go to a gold standard. The only time they'll ever do it is when they're forced into it. And they're going to be forced into it by ordinary people who want to eat. All revolutions are economic in nature. And there was a revolution in France in 1789, and it was total chaos from 1789 till 1796. And then Napoleon took over. They had two different fiat currencies, both of which collapsed. They started off with 35,000 aristocrats, and they ended up with 3,500, and they either killed them or they left. And what's the first thing Napoleon did? He went back to gold and silver.
Rafi, removing gold from backing the US dollar, what are the main negative implications that you see? And is this something that the economy is still experiencing today?
Okay, so here's where I don't think I disagree substantively. I couch it in different terms as to what actually happened in 1971. Because in my way of thinking, there is no detaching dollar from gold. There is, it's possible, but once that happens, meaning by detaching, I mean you can no longer hand in any hunk of dollars for any amount of gold. Nobody accepts any dollars. That's a real full disconnect. And that's just another way of saying hyperinflation. When you can no longer exchange the derivative for the actual money, where the derivative comes from, it was born in gold, or really silver, but then it moved to gold, but whatever, that's a historical point. Then you're really in a hyperinflationary scenario, and you have to go back to gold directly. So in 1971, people say that Nixon took the dollar off of gold. I don't think that's what he actually did. What he actually did, I think, was that he just admitted that all the printing that they'd done from 1934 to 1971, he can't really pay it off anymore. So like he's saying basically, we're not going to lie about the $35 an ounce constant statutory rate anymore. That's fiction. Now we're going to let the market decide what the exchange rate is, and we'll let the bullion dealers, deal with that, and we'll set up a futures market to stabilize the price or whatever. So that's what he did. He just said, well, we've been lying since 1933. I'm sorry, we can't pay anymore. So we're still not disconnected from gold, because you can still exchange it back and forth. And our goal should be to disconnect it so we can ditch the dollar and go back to gold and then rebuild from there. Because we're on an inflationary pyramid that keeps getting thinner and thinner the higher and higher you go, and none of us can breathe up here. That's the problem. So I say disconnect it completely. That's what we're trying to do by buying the gold and chip away at the pyramid. Disconnect it.
And I'd like to get both of your thoughts as well on central bank gold buying that's been happening around the world. Not only, there's been a bit of a spotlight on BRICS member nations, central banks accumulating gold, but central banks around the world have been doing it at a record pace. So why do you think this is? There's a lot of obviously gold bug theories out there that they're planning for a monetary system reset and a return to a gold standard. They want to make sure they have enough gold. But I'd like to get your thoughts, Bob. What do you think?
Well, they're doing it because they're the canary in the coal mine, and they know what's coming. And for the same reason, then Rafi and I think you need to own some gold. Central banks do. They know they're bankrupt, and they're going to do everything in their power to postpone it as long as possible. But the fact of the matter is, if you look at the total amount of debt in the world, which is something above $305 trillion, and look at the total amount of gold in the world, the debt can't be paid, period. And the central banks know that, and they're trying to cover their ass.
And Rafi, Jerome Powell once referred to gold as a speculative asset. Obviously, he probably knows that's not true, as central bankers like to deceive the public. It seems to be their MO. But why do you think central banks have been accumulating so much gold?
I don't know. I can give my theories. It depends on how stupid I think they are, or how hubristic, or how much they really buy into their Keynesian bullcrap. So if they're smart, right? And I'm trying to work this out in my brain. Like if I was a central banker, and let's say like I said the whole Keynesian gobbledygook like in public, and I talked about aggregate demand and all this crap, then at bottom, let's say I was like a Misesian Austrian economist, and I knew this was all going down. If that was what I would do, then like, first of all, the problem would be I'd have to get my entire central banking staff to agree with me. And I don't know if they would do that, because I think most of them are stupid, even if maybe one or two of them are smart in any given central bank. But I think they are worried. But I look at if an end game happens, like what are they going to do? Like revalue gold and then say we're not going to print any money anymore, and then like the staff at the central bank is going to be surrounded by hungry peasants, and they might actually get lynched. And I've said this before. I'm not rooting for this. I don't want it to happen. I'm just saying people are going to come after these FOMC meeting people of different countries, and they're going to try to attack them. So the only conclusion I can come to is they're in a panic. They're buying gold because they think that if they have enough gold and their currency is in trouble, they can sell the gold and then strengthen their currency temporarily and buy themselves a few months. But we've seen in Turkey, they bought a bunch of gold, at the bottom. They sold it at the top. They bought it at the bottom again, and now they're selling it again. How's their currency doing? It's nothing. It's hyperinflating nothing. So it doesn't really matter how much gold a central bank has if the people don't give you any credit because they think you're going to sell it. So I don't really care how much gold central banks have. That's just my thing. Maybe I'm wrong.
What's up, guys? Quick break. My name is Jay Martin. I'm the CEO of Cambridge House and the host of the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference. I wanted to quickly point your attention to a link right beneath this video where you can subscribe to our new weekly newsletter. If you want to better understand the minds of the best investors in the resource space, subscribe to this newsletter. I author it personally every Sunday, and I love writing it. Hit that link below to subscribe. All right, back to the interview.
I would also like to float the theory past both of you that there's an engineered destruction going on of Western societies, both economically, spiritually, culturally. Just using the United States as an example, is the Fed ignorant? Are they helpless, or are they evil? I think this is a question I often grapple with. And then when you look at also what's happening in Europe, what's been happening in France, and a lot of nations, it seems to be kind of a similar situation. So could this be by design, or is it just that the powers that be are helpless or ignorant? What are your thoughts, Bob?
That is an excellent question, and it's one that I've thought about for years. And I happen to be an equal opportunist anarchist. I despise all governments equally. And I think the simple answer is they're stupid. I would love to believe that somebody is smart enough to do this as an organized campaign, but frankly, they're not. They're stupid, and they're greedy, and they're psychopaths, and they are evil people. And they're evil people because we do not have real money. We don't have anything that we can measure success with. And I'm interested in what Rafi says. I think they're ignorant and stupid and evil.
Well, I want to pick up on what you said there, that they are psychopaths. I think that this is actually a theory that I have, that many of the people in charge, including Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of my country, of Canada, are actual clinical psychopaths. Like if you actually put them in a room with an experienced psychologist and they were evaluated, that they would be diagnosed as psychopathic. And I think the general public has a really hard time, first of all, believing that and accepting that the people in charge could actually be enjoying tormenting them and enjoying watching them suffer, which is what psychopaths do. They crave power over others and control over others at all costs. So I think that's a very interesting point. Rafi, what are your thoughts? Is this whole thing engineered, or are the politicians in charge is it hubris, ego, and stupidity?
I don't think it's engineered in the sense, I don't think there's a conspiracy of like a central board of what are we going to do to the world. Okay, there's the World Economic Forum. I understand that. And they're like an iteration of it. But is there one group of people that's really trying to organize this? I don't think so. I think there's just like warring factions of different warlords that are in charge of different territories of the planet, and they're just playing with us like toys. It depends what you want to think of as evil. Like when we say the word evil, some people think of like the real sadistic guy that enjoys inflicting pain on people. I don't think there's a lot of those. I mean, I think Fauci is one of them. I also think Trudeau is one of them, by that disgusting look in his face all the time. But I think most of them are more like Mao. Like Mao, I don't see him as a sadistic guy that enjoyed killing people. I just think he really didn't care at all. And he was just like playing a game with like toys that he really didn't care at all about. And who killed more people, like Hitler or Mao? Mao killed way more because like he was just playing around. Whereas we would associate Hitler with the more, stereotypical evil guy that enjoys hurting people. I think the stupid people are even more dangerous and have even more of an ability to kill many more millions because they're just so dumb. They just keep going. So I don't, you could call that evil too, but I think this is just the natural direction that the world goes in when good people just hide out and don't do anything about it. And human psychology just brings the world into these corrupt directions. And we're going to have to stand in the breach at some point, and we'll be forced to it in the end game. And hopefully we can get through that. But there are good people on the planet, and we'll be in charge again at some point.
So speaking of stupid ideas, central bank digital currencies, obviously, this is a threat. A lot of governments are working on them. The fear is that they could be programmed, and, but is that even needed? In this day and age, we've seen governments freeze bank accounts, as with the trucker convoy in Canada. We're seeing political opponents be debanked in the UK. In America, certain people, I believe Dr. Mercola, who was quite outspoken in terms of vaccines and COVID, has also been debanked. So should your average citizen be worried about both CBDCs and being potentially debanked? Because I think a lot of people sit back and think, well, I'm just a regular, average, everyday Joe. What has it got to do with me? I'm not out there on Twitter saying controversial things, so who cares? So should your average person be worried? And how can they protect their wealth from this sort of government overreach and being debanked? Bob, I'll start with you.
Okay, I think it's very real, and it extends not only to political opponents and medical opponents and information opponents. There is a site called OnlyFans, and if you're good-looking women, you can go on OnlyFans and you can sell pictures of your tits for $5. And evidently they make a lot of money doing that. And quite bluntly, if I could make money doing that, frankly, I'd do the same thing. However, nobody's willing to pay me. But they are being debanked, okay, which is a moralistic judgment. And the crazy thing is, there is nothing that they're doing that's illegal, okay? So you get into this area where you've got a nation of laws, and then you go outside the law. And of course, the government's behind it. The government's talking to the bank saying, okay, we're against gun shops, we're against coin shops, we're against OnlyFans. You need to do something about it. And that's pretty terrifying. I don't think the central bank digital currencies will succeed. I think the financial system is on the edge of a cliff, and we're going to go off the edge of the cliff long before they get around central bank digital currencies. But the book, The Fourth Turning, predicted the crisis stage starting in 2005, 2008. We're in the crisis stage, and you can go to full-bore totalitarianism, or you can opt for freedom. And certainly in the EU, they are opting for full-bore totalitarianism. They have just invoked a law that the EU can now control the internet throughout the world, which is absolutely bizarre. And of course, they're going to push for their narrative. It's not a disinformation issue. They support their narrative, which of course is exactly the opposite of the truth. So there's a move to totalitarianism, and the question is, which happens first? Total totalitarianism, or do we have the crash first? I actually hope the crash comes first.
And Rafi, do you think this shift towards totalitarianism in Western nations, places like the EU, is this something people should be concerned about? Is this the last gasps of a dying animal that's cornered and it's trying to lash out and retain the power that it sees itself losing? And also your thoughts on CBDCs and how you see that evolving moving forward.
Well, okay, so we are moving towards totalitarianism, the world generally. But if you look back in history, how long did really totalitarian regimes last? Not very long. I mean, you could say that the Soviet Union lasted 70 years. Fine, but even if we take that as the longest period, the reason that they were able to last that long is, as the Austrian economist, Mises makes clear, because they were able to use dollar denominated prices to allocate goods and services within the Soviet Union, even though in the Soviet Union they didn't have prices. So they were sort of able to allocate goods and services among their population, which let it hobble along for 70 years. But now we're talking about a global, the dollar itself is hyperinflating. And if that happens, there's no price matrix anywhere. So how is any totalitarian system going to sustain itself without a price system for any goods and services? At that point, the division of labor breaks down and people either go to gold and silver or it's a zombie apocalypse. There's going to be some little pockets of zombie apocalypse, in the bad neighborhoods in the cities, but we'll go to gold and silver quick enough because there will be no other choice that we're going to be able to avert the worst of it, I hope. In terms of CBDCs, that's just a tool that they would use to, cement their totalitarian structure. And the question is, is the current monetary system going to survive long enough for them to implement CBDCs for the short amount of time that it would be possible? Because what people have to understand is that, okay, fine, CBDCs are possible, and yes, it would be totalitarian, but it's not like that. People think that CBDCs are like this stable plateau that's outside the current system where they can perpetuate evil forever, and it'll just stay that way. But no, that's not what it is. What it is another layer on top of the pyramid that we're on right now that makes it even more wobbly. So if it even succeeds at being implemented at all, it won't last very long, because once it collapses, the entire world collapses and we're back to gold and silver and we're back to square one, which is where we want to be, might be scarier in some ways, but it's necessary.
Well, on this program, obviously, we talked to a lot of guests who were well-versed on gold, silver, sound money, as both of you are. We discuss it all the time. So it's easy to forget that most people consider gold to be some relic of the past or a shiny rock used to make jewelry. Education on sound money clearly lacking, perhaps by design. So I wanted to ask both of you, how can we best educate both our children and society at large on precious metals and their role as money? Is such an undertaking possible? Bob, I'll start with you.
Okay, as soon as the banks close, they'll get it.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a good
That is a good answer. And I guess I'll follow up on that. What do you think it would take for us to see something like that in the West? Obviously, we see it in places like Lebanon, where people are robbing banks to get their own money. It's happened around the world in what people would consider to be emerging or developing economies in periods of hyperinflation and economic collapse. What would it take to bring that to the West? Is that a possibility in the near future, in your view?
I think we're seeing the rate of decline in the U.S. empire is absolutely terrifying to me. It's just unbelievable to me that the United States is deteriorating so rapidly. And it's when people realize there's no alternative, they're going to go to gold and silver. I wrote a book in 2016 about my time in the military. At the end of the book, I wrote about we were actually in the world's first worldwide revolution. And I totally believe it. You could see it in Gabon, and you could see it in Niger, and you could see it all over Africa. You could certainly see it in Europe. We are in the phase where things just go all wobbly everywhere. And sincerely, I will welcome the crash, because we can fix it once we hit bottom.
Rafi, I believe you share a similar view to that. So maybe you could share your thoughts on what you see happening with the potential of actually banks being closed and the financial system collapsing. Obviously, it's very hard to call the timing of it. And also your thoughts on educating people on sound money. I know you've spoken before that like with the greater masses, it's very difficult. It's almost like they'll have to learn through the pain of not having gold and silver when that situation occurs. So could you maybe unpack that for us?
Right. Well, look, there's a lot of different voices in our space, and we all speak to different types of people. I speak to the more intellectual types. Other people speak to the more business types. Some people speak to the more, motivational types, and everyone has their language. So I can only tell you how I do it because that's what I'm good at for speaking to the people that I connect with. So like what I'm trying to do is to explain logically from like a philosophy book from the beginning up and up and up and up why gold is not a doorstop. It's not just some shiny metal. It is the basis of everything that we have now, because everything started with that, like world trade as a globalization in a good way, in the good sense of it, like the world connecting with each other. That happened because people just started moving to gold because it was working, and that's all. And to once you understand there's no logical way out of gold being money, it has to be, because otherwise the derivatives of gold are worthless, and then you go back to I just try to hammer this concept so that people who understand it and they can handle whatever layer of volatility is happening, and it's going to get crazy, and they can go back to the logic and say, look, I understand this, I understand what Rafi's saying, and there's no escaping it. So I'm just going to be responsible and have whatever percentage of gold and silver that I have, and then try to calm down, and that way I can keep people in the game who need to be in the game for the end of it so they can help out. In the way I educate my kids, I can tell you one thing I did today. They were working in a distillery, like boxing whiskey for Rosh Hashanah. There's a big bank order of whiskey for Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, and so they're putting on the pallets and whatever. And it's child labor. It's probably illegal, whatever. And I said the whiskey guy's like, can you pay them in silver? He's like, sure, yeah. So I was like, how about 33 cents an hour in silver dollars? So that's like 33 cents in silver an hour. So at the end of the day, they have like an ounce and a half of silver, and I put it in their little safe, and they can come back in 10 years when they're like 20 and see how much money, and buy a house with their coins. So just have your kids feel the stuff, feel what real money really feels like, what no derivatives. Don't put it in a bank. Have them pick it up, put it in their safe, put it in their piggy bank, so they can see how much their money actually weighs. That's how I do it with my kids.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Before I let you guys go, Bob, could you tell us about 321 Gold and anywhere else you want to direct people online?
Okay, well, two things I'd like to do. One is I've written about 10 books, some fiction, some nonfiction, some investing, some about aviation, some about the military. And if someone goes to Amazon.com and puts in Robert Moriarty, read the reviews. They've got very favorable reviews. They're good books. 321 Gold's been around for, let me think, 22 years now, and we're trying to educate people one person at a time. And I really admire Rafi for what he's doing. You've got to be familiar with the video of the guy that goes to NYU or goes to the beach in California, and he offers people either a Krugerrand or a Milky Way, and they want the Milky Way. So, I mean, try to educate people one person at a time. That ain't going to happen, okay? So we've got some people starting the way Rafi does, which is a good thing. But the best education is going to be when you go to the ATM and you put your card in and it spits it out in pieces.
Very well said. And Rafi, could you tell us about the Endgame Investor and anywhere else you want to direct people online?
Yeah, so my newsletter service, and you can find it in any search engine, just Endgame Investor. It's on Seeking Alpha, and I write 3-4 times a week with the weekend report. Basically, what I'm doing is I'm talking about what's going on in the monetary system and the banking system, and how it interplays with gold and silver, focusing on the COMEX, deliveries, whatever's going on there, and the LBMA. And I do it from an Austrian School of Economics perspective, meaning positive is logical, my style. And for people who want to really understand the intricacies of the monetary system and what's going on in like the plumbing, that's why I don't know everything about it, but I try to figure this out, and people can, you know, get a picture into my mind of how I'm thinking about the world in that given day. And sometimes I give trading advice depending if I see a good price somewhere or whatever. That's what I do. You can find me on YouTube. My channel is Rafi Farber. I try to put a video or two out and try to make it funny every week. And you can check me out on Patreon, patreon.com/endgameinvestor, where I give a more biblical, Jewish biblical angle on what's going on with money. You know, the Jews, we read a different portion of the Torah each week, so I try to reflect it back into the monetary system, and I can almost always do it. For people who, even if you're religious or not, if you want to see how a very, very old book is relating to monetary issues in the same way, it could be very eye-opening and also encouraging and calming that this is not the first time we've gone through this. We've done it before, and we'll do it again.
Well, I'll put links to everything both of you have mentioned below in the description for people who want to check that out. I knew this was going to be an awesome panel when both of you agreed to come on. It did not disappoint. Really appreciate you coming on, and definitely hope to do it again.
Good questions, Jesse. I enjoyed this, and it was fun meeting Rafi. I appreciate his point of view.
Yeah, I've been a fan of Bob since I was a teenager. Yeah, so 2001 and 321 Gold was founded. So I think I started in like 2004, 5, 2006, so maybe, or early 20s. Yeah, I've been a fan of Bob since my early 20s, and I'm 40 now.
That's awesome. Well, thanks to both of you, and you guys have yourselves a great day.
You too.
Here we go.